going. My Life in Letters, episode 8 is gonna be great. Today on the phone, calling from Staten Island, from his studio, we have Chris Robots Will Kill, Chris RWK, as he is commonly known. And we were talking before we started recording about, Chris said, and I love this, that he's going to put the Chris in Christmas, as this is going to be our Christmas episode. And I love that because that's sort of your spirit, man. That's sort of like the thing. That's your vibe, you know? Like, it's all this giving, all this support. Like, I feel the love coming from you guys. You've reposted our podcast several times. You've reposted my work a few times. And, like, every time, man, it's like, that's so great, you know, and that whole hashtag support those who support you that you use. I don't know if that's something you came up with or if other people were using that first. You're the first person I've seen use that, and you guys, you know, you use it on the regular. That is what I think has driven, and that is one of the things I think that so many people feel when they check out your work, and it makes your work more approachable because you're not self-serving. We can feel that you are trying to like hook other people up, and so it's huge, man, and it's great, and it's one of many reasons that I'm super happy to have you on the show today. I mean, even if you weren't sharing my work or other people's work, I would be stoked to have you on the show because what you do is so good, and you've also been so consistent. I mean, you've been doing this, I feel like I've been watching for 10 years, and I know you've been doing it longer than that. So, and again, can't thank you enough for being here. I'll continue to thank you because I kind of, the way I have been trained and the way I live my life is we can't thank people enough. We can't say thank you enough. We can't say please enough. You know, we can't try to give enough. So, thank you again. Let's just get into it.
Thank you. You know, it's always been a community that's kind of got to support each other because, I mean, it has always been an underdog outside kind of society.
Yeah. If we don't support each other, like, who will, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know how it is. I mean, if we're not supporting each other, you know, the outside, you know, the higher ups or whatever likes to come in, bleed it dry, and then leave. You know, so if you know we don't have those people who are continuing the support for each other, you know, we're going to be left out in the lurch, you know? Yeah,
that's absolutely right. To touch on that a little bit later in the interview. But, you know, what I really like to do is try to start as early as I can with people. And, you know, I think that you're going to be I'm excited about this interview because I think that you're a bit atypical in maybe just in your approach, in your work, in the work that you do with your characters. But can we go back to, like, real early stages? Because I actually don't know how much sort of, like, lettering is a part of your world. I mean, I see that you have like a tag, like kind of hand style that you do with your characters, but I got to admit, or I got to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about your history. So can we start early on as like a child? Like, do you remember your earliest kind of interactions with just lettering in general and type or handwriting, typography? What are your memories?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, pretty much like any kid, comics and cartoons were such a huge influence. Back then, I really, I was big on imagery and not reading. Still kind of am. So that's why I think characters kind of always portrayed a little bit more of an interest to me. But as far as like lettering and stuff like that, you know, the bubble letters and it's funny, I was listening to an episode, I think it was the Persuade episode, where he's talking about like the bubble letters that girls would do in school.
Yeah, it was Persuade. Yeah.
And it's funny because it's so truthful. Like, you know, like it's the most non-graffiti thing, but at the same time, it was like the first first interaction people do have with it because girls did have handwriting like that. I mean, like whether it was dotting I's with hearts or whatever, right. It was still a stylized handwriting. I mean, like I grew up with a mom who had like a fantastic, penmanship. Like her penmanship was incredible. And I went to Catholic school, so like script was something that was like driven into our heads, and like by second grade we were we'd have the lined paper with the the dotted line, so you had to break the line at a certain point, right. And all that stuff. So that was I think what kind of like handwriting wise kind of like was a big influence in the beginning. As I got older, my brother and his friends had gotten into graffiti, so I would see them like doing tags and stuff like that, and I think I was probably like about 10 or 11. Him and his friends were like 5 years older than me, and they started writing their initials and stuff like that, and like that was the first form of like graffiti that I really kind of had involvement with, besides like skateboard ads and stuff like that.
And you grew up in Staten Island, yeah?
Yeah, I grew up in Staten Island. So we had out here we didn't really have a lot of it was kind of secluded from a lot of the other boroughs. Like we have one train line that's above ground, so there really wasn't any graph on it.
Mm-hmm.
The highways would get hit a lot. But, like, as a kid, that's not, I mean, it really wasn't, like, really young, like, before 10 or 11, it really wasn't getting grilled. That was happening more, like, like around 88, 89, 90. That's when I really saw that kind of stuff. But
and that was when you said your brother was starting to do graffiti,
yeah,
88?
Like around when I was 10, him and his friends started writing, and, they were doing their initials, and then they slowly kind of, like, started picking their tag names, and me as a kid, I was writing my name because it's pretty much, you didn't think of doing a tag,
Yeah.
So, like, my brother started writing Nerve, N-E-R-V. One of his best friends wrote Edge, E-D-G-E. Then there was Oi, Verse, Real, Mech. There's all these guys, they're like the CTO crew.
Oh, really? Oh, so same verse. Okay, nice.
Yeah, you've painted with Verse.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually grew up with him. He grew up down the block from me. I pretty much like played wiffle ball in his yard for years before they started doing graph. So like we grew up skateboarding together and BMX and all that stuff.
That's interesting. I didn't know. For some reason, I always thought Verse was like a Brooklyn kid. So he's a Staten Island kid.
Well, he was actually originally from Brooklyn, but like most of the people, once they outgrew Brooklyn, for lack of a better term, they'd moved to Staten Island. Yeah, like even like my parents, like they grew up. My mom grew up in Spanish Harlem. My dad grew up in Brooklyn, and when they got married, and as my brother got older, they wanted to get a house.
Yeah.
And Staten Island was affordable, and it was blue collar back then. It was a nice working class neighborhoods and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he had moved in. I was living here, and he moved in. I forget how old I was, but he moved in across the street from my cousins. So that's how I was always at my cousin's house, so I was just kind of always playing wiffle ball and all that stuff.
And so Nerve, Edge, Oi, those guys were all CTO. Your brother was writing Nerve, you said?
Yeah. So my brother would do highways and stuff like that once in a while, but he was big on he liked doing pieces and like more abandoned spots and stuff like that. So all of his friends were really doing like the real highway like stuff, like Verse and Edge. Like they pretty much had every single overpass from this side of the island, which is out by like I'm out on the South Shore, out by like Jersey.
Yeah.
So they had basically every overpass from here out to the Verrazano Bridge. They had every single one, and they had like full, huge block letters. I mean, it was incredible to see and grow up around. So they were doing all that, and I was still too young to really like kind of do any of that stuff. So they didn't want to get in trouble by like getting caught with me. So I would go with them, but I would go and just take pictures. So I was taking like all these pictures. I was probably like about 11 or 12 at the time. I'm taking all these pictures. I hadn't really picked the tag or anything like that. I was still just, fooling around with writing Chris, and so I had all these photo albums. So around, I guess it was like around 7th grade, I had friends in school who started talking about how they were doing graffiti, like they were trying to make it sound cool. And I'm like, really? I'm like, you guys do graffiti? And they're like, yeah. So like I got excited because I'm sitting there, I got like photo albums of all these pictures, that I've taken, and I'm like, I'm amped to kind of bring them in and be like, yo, look at this. Like I was like, if you do graffiti, you know who this is because you've seen it,
Right.
And I bring in these books, and like they're kind of like, oh yeah, cool, and I'm like, all right, I guess you guys don't really do graffiti. I guess it's just kind of like a passing phase kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They were just kind of, I think, doing it because they heard it was cool, and like it was in between doing sports, because like they were doing sports and stuff like that. I was doing like skateboarding, so that's why I thought it was cool. Like once they said graffiti, I was like, oh shit, I have something I can kind of bond with them with, and it just didn't happen like that. Like I was showing them pictures of like Scope 2 and Mars and Once and like all these like Staten Island like legends, and they just didn't get it. So I was like, all right, never mind. So I kind of like left that. But at the same time, I was figuring that I needed to pick a tag. I needed to have something. So I started going through like a dictionary, and I found the name Vex, V-E-X, and I thought that was just a great word. It had a great meaning, and it actually meant something. It wasn't just like a random word. So I started doing that like around 8th grade.
Were you vexed at the time? Were you a vexed 8th grader?
Yeah, I was listening to punk rock and hardcore, so I had to be a little bit annoying and aggravated.
Who were you listening to? What kind of hardcore?
at that time, big into like Gorilla Biscuits, Sick of It All,
Nice.
Killing Time, Inside Out, pretty much all the bands, like a lot of the Youth Crew stuff, a lot of the positive. I was straight edge. Like as soon as I was like old enough to decide I wanted to be straight edge, I just was straight edge.
Yeah.
So like around 12 or 13, all my friends thought like, stealing bottles of alcohol from their parents and all that stuff, and I'm like, nah, it's not for me. It's not. I don't want any of that crap. And I identified with the straight edge lifestyle, so that was just kind of like what I ran with.
I'm curious, was there a pretty decent straight edge community in Staten Island at the time?
Not at all. I mean, my brother and his friends were straight edge.
Okay.
Actually, that's where Edge got his name from, was straight edge.
Ah, nice.
But on Staten Island, the punk and hardcore scene was very small and minimal. Back then, everybody knew who everybody was. That was it.
Yeah.
There was one store on the island that you'd basically troop to get your silver jewelry. That was otherwise you go into the city, and you go to St. Mark's or whatever. You go to 99X and Bleecker Bob's, all those places. Because that was as soon as I was old enough to figure out how to get into the city, that's what I did. I didn't hang out on Staten Island. I would skate out here and stuff like that, but as far as hanging out and going to shows and stuff like that, as soon as I could get to the city, I was in the city. When I was probably about 13, I figured out how to get to the ferry. Screw it, I'm going to hang out by CBGB's, going to hang out in all those areas.
Nice. And let me backtrack a little bit, because you had mentioned guys like Scope 2 and Mars and Once, these guys that are, like you said, kind of like the legends of Staten Island. So you were seeing their work in the kind of late 80s, early 90s? They were on your radar?
Yeah. Down, actually, probably about a 20-minute bike ride from my house was Seguin Beach. And Seguin Beach was kind of like a hotbed for graffiti writers, especially on this side of the island. Everybody would go down there. They would do pieces. I mean, it was kind of like a nice chill spot.
Was it legal, or was it just chill?
No, it was illegal.
Okay.
Basically, it was an old factory that had burned down, and the structure was still there. So it was literally on the beachfront. Mm-hmm. So you basically go hang out, paint. Beautiful scene, back then, I mean, it was the 80s and 90s, so it was still kind of dirty before they cleaned everything up, but, we basically painted on the beach. So It was pretty awesome. So pretty much any opportunity I got to go down there, I did. Every weekend.
And so you would see those guys down there, you'd see Mars and Once and them painting walls?
A lot of the times they would paint, I would guess, during the week, so they wouldn't see people on the weekends because it was, people would go down fishing and stuff like that on the weekend. So pretty much every weekend I would go down there and you get to see something new because they do it during the week. Mm-hmm. So, being in grammar school, I get out of school at 3 o'clock or whatever. Couldn't really get down there during the day after school, so I'd have to wait till the weekend.
Yeah.
So pretty much every weekend I go down there with my camera, take a bunch of pictures. I had my markers and I cut little tags here and there, little kid stuff. But seeing all that stuff, seeing Sign and Lev, they did, their stuff was awesome to me. Their work was so clean and just legible. That was another thing. I loved being able to see a Scope 2 piece that had this, technical aspect, but then turning a corner and seeing a Sign and Lev piece that you're I know what that says.
Yeah.
It's nice and straightforward. I mean, they had the front of the building. They did top to bottoms on the front of the building twice. That was just incredible. But that was around 8th grade. So then once I went to high school, I actually started meeting people who actually were into graffiti and did go out and catch tags and bomb and stuff like that. There was a couple of kids that I met freshman year, and when I was about, I guess it was 13. Yeah, I was about 13. This kid AWOL, AWOL, who was in my neighborhood. Rest in peace. He actually passed away a few years ago. But he was the first kid that actually went bombing with, real bombing with, not just marking tags and stuff like that. So we pretty much had a couple of cans of flat black. At the time, I changed my tag. I started writing ND, the letters ND. Pretty much stood for a couple of things. The old skate company, New Deal. But then also, because the whole straight edge thing, it actually also meant no drugs, no drinking, never dull. Just a play on all the different,
Yeah.
So, me, him, and then my cousin, who lives across the street from Verse, he wanted to come out bombing, so I told him to take my old tag, so he started writing Vex. so the three of us, we go out bombing, and it was just a blast. We just catching tags everywhere, and, stupid, just stupid fun. So, freshman year really was when I started kind of, build on, the realizing that I could do my own graffiti, and I didn't have to just look at what my brother and his friends were doing.
Right, and I wanted to ask about that. How much did your brother's style? I mean, actually, tell me, did he have style? Was he dope?
I mean, his pieces. He had great pieces.
Nice.
I mean, he had kind of simple letter forms, but his fills were complex. Like he had this one piece. I unfortunately only have a Polaroid picture of it. It was this green piece where he did. It was actually a white fade to green, but he did these white and green like water drop orbs, like floating in the letters.
Nice.
That I think were kind of ahead of its time, and I mean, it was great to see it and grow up with it. But he kind of like gave up on it, and he got into other things and got distracted. Where all of his friends were still going out like every night. They were doing like Edge and Burst were doing pieces, daytime, and then going bombing every night, and that was incredible to see. And it's incredible to see driving down the highway and seeing these guys on every highway and being like, I know these guys.
Yeah, like, I was just thinking about that. Like, that's like really like you were fortunate, man. Like, that's such a cool opportunity that few people had. I mean, first of all, to see graph in your own home, like having an older brother, and then again to be able to know CTO dudes or whoever you knew rolling down the freeway and you see them up. Like that's pretty unique and cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was insane. I mean, like it just like I had sketchbooks that were just full of just like them just fooling around doing fill-ins and stuff like that and developing their styles. Like I had like notebook after notebook of Edge just working on his letters and
Nice.
and then to see him up on the street and everything, that was just incredible. I'm like, this dude eats dinner at my house like almost every night. Like it was crazy.
Cool.
But like at the same time, it was just Staten Island. I wasn't going into the city yet. Like I said, when I was like 13, I started going to the city. That's when I really started doing like how grilled things could be.
So what year was that? Was that 92? If I'm trying to keep track here.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, so that was 90. So it was 13. It was like 90, 91, like around that era.
Okay. And can you tell us just a little bit like what the scene was like, Staten Island and Manhattan or wherever else you were going? What was the scene like?
Well, Staten Island, everything was grilled. I mean, everything and anything was written on. I mean, if you see old photos from the paper, I mean, you could just see how, it was tag on top of tag, fill-in on top of tag. It was just everything was destroyed. And at that time is when the island started to kind of change a little bit and more money was being brought out this way, and it was like the Brooklyn people moving from Brooklyn to Staten Island to kind of get a better life for their families. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to see less of the graffiti, so then there was like a really big cleanup, around that time. Back then, I mean, like, the CTO guys, like their attitude was always like, bomb until they run out of buff paint, and just keep hitting the highways and keep hitting the highways. And nobody had cell phones. Nobody, there wasn't cameras everywhere. It was different. And, so the island was starting to get cleaned up. And my father worked in Brooklyn, so I pretty much was in Brooklyn as pretty much almost every weekend. I'd go to work with him, help out or whatever. So I was seeing a lot of stuff in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And Brooklyn was destroyed, too. I mean, Brooklyn, everything was hit. So I think when those people were coming out to Staten Island, they didn't want to see that anymore. They felt like they were buying a house, so they didn't have to deal with it.
And when you were coming in, those dudes that were like really killing Manhattan and Brooklyn, who was it that you were seeing? Who inspired you back then?
Duel was big. MQ, and also Jest, J-E-S-T, Nest, Med. A lot of the, I spent a lot of time in the car driving in Brooklyn, so I see a lot of highways, the BQEs and stuff like that. So I see a good mix of stuff. So I got to see highway stuff, then also see the street stuff from commuting into the city.
Nice.
So like getting to see. And also, I guess because of where I was hanging out, going to like the punk and hardcore venues and stuff like that, I'd see like the guys like MQ, who's down like DMS, Zac, and all those guys. So it was kind of cool for me to kind of put those two like worlds together, seeing like the hardcore world and the graffiti world kind of mesh. And growing up on Staten Island, they were so separate because there wasn't a big hardcore community. So I really didn't even think they intermingled until I started seeing these people up in the venues I was going to. And seeing like an MQ tag like in CBGB's was just like, whoa, this guy comes here. It was just kind of like mind-boggling. And then you see kind of album art and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, I get it. Obviously, he's into hardcore. He's down with these guys. You start kind of putting two and two together. So that was like around that. That was like around 91, 92. Like who else was really like influential back then? I I mean, like bombing-wise, I always loved, like Jest, his stuff. I loved how clean his letters were.
Yeah.
And as far as, like, the island, I'm trying to think who else really just, like, kind of sticks out. Like, NES3 used to bomb, but also do pieces, which was awesome. So you kind of like Edge.
NES3?
Say NS3.
NS3. I never heard of him. So he's a Staten Island dude?
Yeah, Staten Island guy. He used to write Deca before that, DEKA. But you know what? There's a lot of the Staten Island guys kind of, not many of them made it off the island. You know, they go bomb in Brooklyn and Manhattan here and there, but it was never like they did big missions. And in the areas, Staten Island's kind of infamous for stuff like that. Like even like bands, you know, you know, they could be big on Staten Island, but they don't go on tour or they don't leave the island, which was always kind of weird. And that was the kind of thing that I was like kind of anti. Like I was like, I wanted to get into the city. I wanted to go around. I wanted to see what else was there. You know, like I wanted to see, you know, like going to see shows in the city. Like my friends, I'd be like, dude, you know, I'm like, you know, Killing Time's playing at CBGB's. Let's go. And they're like, no, I got something to do. And I'm like, well, we gotta take the train and the ferry. I'm like, and the subway. I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. They just didn't want to do it. So kind of Staten Island always kind of had that kind of secluded mentality.
Yeah. I mean, I could see why, you know. I mean, when you're there, you're kind of like, oh, finally I made it, you know. So I kind of get it, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been, I don't want to say, I'm not anti in the sense of, like, their attitude against it. I just didn't understand it.
Sure.
You know, like,
sure.
For me, I don't know if it's the art mentality, you know, but seeing everything I could see, like, being able to know that, being able to go to, like, a museum and not on a school, like, trip was awesome. You know, like, it's New York. It's one of the largest places, you know, like, in the world. There's so many inspirations, and you don't want to go out and see them. Like, I just didn't understand it.
So you were doing that early on, too? You were going to museums or galleries as a kid?
Not really galleries, but mostly museums because I knew where they were. Like, you know, like, you knew about them.
Yeah.
You know, like, when I was, like, around 13 or 14, you heard about, like, gallery scene, but the only way I kind of stumbled upon galleries was, you know, back then was, like, going to, like, Scrapyard, you know, because Scrapyard was right by Soho. So, you know, back then was, like, Soho was that, Soho Down Under, whatever it was. You know, you'd go there, you know, get some graffiti supplies and shirts or whatever, and then, you know, kind of walk around the neighborhood a little bit, kind of stumble into galleries and be like, oh, okay. But at the same time, you know, I'm in, like, this kind of graffiti mentality where I wasn't understanding art. You know, it was just kind of like, oh, that shit's crazy. You know, like, why would you do that? You know, like, you see a Rothko painting, you're kind of like, all right, you made a giant color shape. I don't get why that one canvas is one color. But, you know, I mean, but at the same time, I wanted to see it. You know, like, even though I wasn't getting it, I still wanted to see it because I wanted to know what was out there.
Did someone did your parents or your brother kind of lead you towards that? Was that something that was in the family, like support about art?
Not really. Like, my family was supportive about art, but they weren't, you know, it wasn't like we were going to galleries or going to museums. My brother, he would go to museums here and there, but that was kind of like when he was older. I think for me, once I knew things were out there, I kind of just wanted to experience them more. So once I knew, like, there was a museum of natural history, I was like, dude, this place has dinosaur bones. It's got, you know, it's got you know, armor. It's got everything you could want to see. You know, so that always kind of amazed me. And it was New York. You know, I mean, it was the place where we lived.
Yeah. And
so my parents were supportive. I mean, like, you know, for example, like when I was like in 7th grade, I got the chicken pox, and so did my brother. And my father came home, you know, because we were basically bedridden. He came home and brought me spray can art and subway art.
Nice.
You know, and like that was I was like, holy, you know, like that was my introduction to know that these things could get published too. You know, like, you know, I'm used to seeing it on the street. I'm used to taking pictures of it, but here are these two amazing produced books that I'm just like, holy crap. And yeah, I was in 7th grade, so I had to be like 12 years old.
That's so cool.
Yeah, like 89. Yeah, holy crap.
Your dad must have been amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean that's what's awesome. I mean, he's always been supportive. I mean, obviously he kind of wanted to steer me away from doing like the bombing and stuff like that.
Sure.
But he knew it was something I had a passion for, so he wanted to show me that there's other outlets to it besides throw-ups and fill-ins. You know, he wanted to show me about pieces and stuff like that. Even though I saw them already, but he was trying to help out, which was cool.
Yeah, and now you have these 2 books, so you can see this like really epic documentation of New York City subway graffiti, and then you see spray can art, which maybe I'm curious if it opened your eyes to there's graph in like every major city in the States now. Was spray can art, was one of those more influential than the other?
Yes, spray can art, definitely. Mainly because, well, it had a section on every borough.
Mm-hmm.
So it was incredible to see Staten Island in there. And it was incredible to know that, like, the subways were insane. Like, that was great. But it was an era that was kind of, like, done, and
Yeah.
And I knew that I was never going to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing spray can art, it was walls and stuff like that I knew I could do.
Mm-hmm.
So that I related to a lot more, definitely.
And are you writing ND still at this point?
Yeah. So I started. No, I was still young at that point. I was still messing around with Chris and Vex.
Okay.
So ND came into play when I started high school. So like 91.
Okay.
91, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So from 91 until until the whole Robots Will Kill thing started, well, that was kind of separate. I was still doing ND, but I was also doing actually, to go back, you were asking about lettering. So I was doing pieces and stuff like that, but I always loved involving characters, and I think it was because of that mindset of being able to relate to them better.
Yeah.
And being able to relate to a character. I mean, you could talk to people nowadays. I mean, they want to see a character on a wall opposed to letters.
Yeah.
Regardless if it's a beautiful piece, they still want to see a character.
Yeah, I mean, people people see something in a character that they can understand, and it's sometimes hard to decipher something out of a graffiti piece.
Yeah. I mean, it's more relatable. I mean, it's just, and it's and that's knocking letters at all. That's just saying. I mean, that's what people outlook is.
Sure.
So at the time, like, even though I was doing pieces, I was kind of doing a little bit more simpler pieces, but I was doing characters with them to kind of like mix the two worlds together.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up on cartoons and comics, that was just like what I appreciated. Like for example, like Gary Larson, like The Far Side. What that dude could do in one panel create such an amazing story, like in just one panel. One-liners that were just incredible. That just blew me away, and that was something I kind of wanted to be able to capture.
I'm curious if you were drawing your own characters at that point. Were you doing that? Were you copying others? How much were you drawing at the time as a kid?
I was mixing the two. Because the way I was looking at it is I kind of had to copy characters in order to understand them, to understand how I can develop my own character.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you like, for example, if you look at Garfield, the way he draws, Jim Davis draws a cat is different than how other people draw a cat.
Right.
But at the same time, you know what it is as soon as you see it. So I needed to kind of figure out how I can draw my own cat and make it, convey that cat persona. So I'd copy Garfield, and then I would try to draw my own version of a cat. So I was kind of mixing the two together, trying to you know what it is? I think when I saw spray can art and subway art, and you had a lot of these artists who were doing comic strip characters, and they were just kind of copying them. I saw that, and I was like, I get it, but at the same time, it is almost just like copying. Like you did this amazing, piece, and you came up with these letters on your own, but then you kind of copied just a character.
Yeah.
I didn't kind of grasp that. So when I was copying the characters, I kind of wanted to copy them so I can develop my own. So, for example, the first piece I remember doing was 1990. It was an abandoned sewer tunnel down the block from my house, and I did the wizard from Hagar the Horrible.
Oh, sick. Yeah.
Zoot. I think his name was Zoot. So I did that character with a spray can, spraying my throw up. So I still did my letters in there, but I kind of broke it down, and I had this character interacting with the letters, so it wasn't just, part A, part B.
Mm-hmm.
So it was teal green with teal blue. Oh my God, Jesus Christ, I remember. It was Krylon. I used Krylon for it, and it was teal blue and teal green with beige and a black and white fill, semi-flat black with a white fill.
Mm-hmm.
And
you have flicks of that?
No. Sad story was a friend of mine who had his camera with him. He took pictures of it, and then he went to Italy for some family vacation. The camera got stolen in Italy, and I never had pictures of it.
Dang.
That sucked. but yeah, so as far as creating my own characters, I was starting to kind of develop my own character style, and but at the same time, it was kind of involving the generic things that characters needed. Like back then, like I was making sure that they had a nose, a mouth, eyes, kind of stuff that really was typical of a cartoon character.
Sure.
It wasn't until I got older that I kind of realized that I could create my own thing, and it didn't have to have these typical characteristics.
Yeah.
So.
And you went to high school. What was the high school you went to in Staten Island?
A Lady Star of the Sea. It was a Catholic high school.
And were there writers there besides you?
Yeah, like I was saying, in freshman year, I met a couple. Nobody really, again, mostly all Staten Island guys that really didn't make it off the island. Like a kid I painted with a lot was this kid Said, S-A-I-D. Another kid that I don't talk to anymore, so I really don't want to mention him. But there was this kid at Type. He wrote Type, C-Y-P-E, and he was actually from the other side of the island, over by like where the VGL guys were, and like Gano, and a lot of those kind of guys, and Exit, Cram, SAG, a bunch of those guys. So like talking with him, he kind of opened my eyes to a whole other area of graffiti on Staten Island that I wasn't, familiar with.
Nice.
So once I learned about that, I started going to that side of the island to get pictures and stuff like that, which was pretty awesome. But as far as like other kids who wrote, I mean, a lot of them were kids that like they said they wrote. They would write for a little bit and then kind of lose interest in it. And the typical kind of like teenage mindset.
Yeah. So you continued bombing all throughout high school?
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much focused more on doing. I like doing pieces a lot more than bombing. I love doing pieces in like abandoned spots. Like chill spots. And
were you the kind of dude that was drawing a lot of pieces, or were you going to walls to work out letters?
A little bit of both. As far as like outlines, I would do outlines on paper. I would kind of try to mess with fill-ins with like the Design 1 markers, but even back then they were not the same as paint. Yeah. So a lot of times like the fill, I would kind of like just go to the wall, have an outline, but then do the fill off the top of my head with the paint. I'd have a color scheme, but I wouldn't have like a specific planned out idea.
And you were saying earlier that you were using Krylon in that sewer tunnel. Was that sort of like your go-to paint?
Yeah, Krylon. I mean, Krylon was great because it was accessible. And back then there was no cages and stuff like that. Even if you bought it, it was still only like $2 a can. Right. Were you racking though early? No, not really. I was not a big fan of it because I had family members who worked in stores and stuff like that would go on, and they kind of lost their jobs. So I saw how that kind of would affect, because when it came down to it, stealing wasn't hurting the big picture. Yeah, stealing hurts more of the managers. Yeah, totally. The smaller guys. So my mentality, I kind of was like, you know what, it's not for me. People do it, whatever, but it just wasn't my thing. Well, it's kind of interesting too, because you were like a straight edge, so you'd been making several choices that were sort of like, they had there was like a moral bent to your decision making, that's pretty impressive for a kid. Yeah, I appreciate that. I figured, I would steal markers and stuff like that, and it was cool when I was at that, but at the same time, like I said, I mean, it wasn't even like the feel bad thing about it. I knew that, for example, like in high school, I can do a piece for a kid for, his girlfriend. I'll do his girlfriend's name, and he'll pay me $10 for it. Yeah. And there I am. I'm like, all right, now I got $10 in my pocket. I can go and buy the paint. I really don't need to steal it. Whatever. Yeah, totally. So like that was the stuff I would do in high school, and that was the way I looked at it. And I mean, at the same time, also my family had they owned an ice cream store, and I knew like kids stealing candy did make a difference, because it wasn't a corporation, it was mom and pop shops. So so yeah, I guess it was me being an old fuddy-duddy even when I was a teenager. I mean, I have a kid now, and I'm just thinking, no, that's a good kid. That's what that was. Your parents did it right. So good job. I appreciate it. So, I'm like, I guess we'll just move kind of forward a little bit. I'm really curious. So in high school, did you say really briefly a second ago that Robots Will Kill came up in high school? No, Robots Will Kill came up later on. So just to go through it real quick, in high school, I was still doing graffiti and stuff like that. Senior year, I had to pick like an elective kind of thing, and I figured pick art instead of typography because I couldn't care about typing. Not typography. I'm sorry, typing.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, which people probably don't even know about nowadays. But it basically was a class that you learned how to type.
Yeah, I never took it. I wish I had. I'm a horrible typist now.
Oh, I'm the worst at it, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? That had to be boring as hell.
Yes.
So I went to art. I went to the art class. My art teacher looked at my stuff. I had to get approved for it. She loved my work, whatever. So she said to me, towards the end of the year, she's like, not at the beginning of the year, she said, what are you going to do for college? I said, community college. I couldn't care. She's like, no, you're going to art school. And I was like, what? She's like, no, you're going to go to art school. We're going to work the whole year on your portfolio and the story. I was like, oh, okay. So
nice.
We put together a portfolio. Yeah, we put together a portfolio. So senior year, when I graduated, I went to FIT in the city on over on 27th Street.
Yeah. So,
I went through high school, met some graffiti guys. Now I'm going into the city. I'm actually seeing a lot more graph. This was '95.
Let me stop you for 1 second. What was the work that you what was the work that you showed your teacher your senior year? What was it that she saw when you started that class?
A lot of character stuff. A lot of more illustration kind of stuff, like characters, anime. I was kind of messing with woodcut, but more of cutting soap.
Okay, carvings.
That's so stupid. So yeah, it was like wood carving, but I was using bars of soap because it was cheap.
Yeah.
And easy to get, and basically just making stamps out of them.
Nice.
So I was showing her that stuff, and she loved the fact that it wasn't just still lifes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. And so she sees something in you. Who was that? What was her name? That teacher.
Her name's Miss Volpe.
Yo, shout out to Miss Volpe, right? I mean, if it wasn't for her, dude, who knows what could have happened with.
It's the truth. I mean, if it wasn't for her, I probably would have ended up going to community college and getting some city job.
Yeah. So instead, she helps you get into FIT. I'm also curious what kind of portfolio you put together your senior year for art school admissions.
It was a lot of it was illustration kind of stuff, a lot of character-based stuff like that. So it was actually to the point where, when I went there, I was going for fine art, and the fine art professor was like, you should have came for illustration instead. And I was like, kind of stuck now, and he was like, you know what, just do fine art for a year or two, and if you want to, transfer, you can.
Is that what you did?
So a lot of it was, what I wound up doing, I went there for fine art, and back then they only had a 2-year degree for fine art. So as an associate, I got the associate, and after that, I decided that I wanted to kind of learn more, art-wise. So I wound up going to Hunter for my BFA. So I went there from 98 to 2001.
And you were studying illustration at Hunter?
No, I was still studying painting.
Okay.
I didn't want to go into illustration because at the time I had a lot of friends who were doing illustration, and a lot of them ended up in kind of jobs that were, copy this, copy that, and I just couldn't. I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Sure.
I was just like, nah, I don't want to do that. I think it went back to the whole copying cartoons and instead creating my own thing.
Yeah.
So I went for fine art. I went for painting. So I got my bachelor's from there. BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts. And after that, I graduated, and the first thing I thought of, is now I need to go to galleries. So here I am, 22. I guess I was 22.
Okay.
I think.
In 2001.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started going to galleries, and I'm bringing my slides because back then it was slides. There wasn't, nobody was looking at PDFs yet.
Yeah.
He was looking at websites. So I'm bringing slides, and I'm going to all these galleries in Soho, and basically their reaction to me was, "How old are you?" Excuse me? They're like, "How old are you?" And I'm like, "What does that matter?" They're like, "Well, why don't you come back in a few years?" I'm like, "You haven't even looked at my work yet." And they're like, Yeah, come back in a few years. I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." I'm like, "Ma'am," I'm like, "You haven't even looked at my work." She's like, "I just know by experience. You need to come back in a few years."
Interesting.
So here I am. I'm jaded as hell now.
Yeah.
I'm like, I went to multiple galleries. Not even one would look, and their answer was just that. Whether it was the gallery owner that was telling me that, or the the art student who was covering the front desk, whatever, it was still just very off-putting to me. So around that time, I had met Kevin, who is the web guy behind Robots Will Kill.
Okay.
So around that time, around 2000, I met him, and we would talk about, creating a website for, my artwork at first. Because at the time, there really wasn't a lot of, only, really kind of, legit artists had websites.
Sure.
Because it was still HTML and all that stuff. And, and he knew all this stuff. He was, brilliant with it. So now after I get rejected by all these galleries from not even looking at my work yet, I said to him, I don't want to create a website for myself. I want to create a website for people, people in general.
Like what?
Especially artists.
What did that mean? You already wanted to create like a platform to like kind of highlight other people?
Yeah, I wanted it to be, I wanted it to create a website for artists who were getting overlooked, and whether that was graffiti, sticker art, repasting, photography, whatever. I wanted this platform for people.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
So,
can we unpack that just a little bit? Like, did you know like a whole bunch of people that fit that bill?
At the time, yeah, because in college, I met artists of other, formats, other mediums, everything. I came from this, graffiti world that just I knew about graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the stuff I saw. I knew Costin and Riders did repastes, but I didn't realize that there were, people out there doing, artwork repastes, like Swoon and all these people.
Right.
So I get to meet all these people when I'm in college and learning more and more and just like everything that was out there.
I'm curious if you were meeting more sort of like artists of note at FIT or more at Hunter.
It was more at Hunter because Hunter was more of a serious school in the sense of it had a longer program. Right,
not just a 2-year. Okay.
Right. So back then at FIT, you did 2 years, and then you could do fine art anymore. You had to go into illustration, advertising design, toy design, something else.
Yeah.
So at Hunter, you had artists who were going for their BFA, their MFA.
Yeah.
The actual art field in general.
Yeah, more a little bit more focused, a little more serious.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm learning about all these other artists, and learning about lowbrow artists. People I already knew about, like Ed Roth, but not realizing that there was people out there like Robert Williams, or like all these other like kind of like Von Dutch and like all these other like lowbrow people that were doing amazing work.
Mm-hmm.
So like around 2000, so it was late 2000. I said to him like, let's create this platform. So he was down for it. He loved the idea. Now he, we're getting close to the launch and everything like that. He's like, well, what do you want to name it? Now, back in 1999, I had done an art fellowship up in Vermont. I had this professor named Emily Mason, fantastic abstract painter, just awesome person in general. She paid for me to do this fellowship up in Vermont. So I'm up in Vermont for a month straight, just creating artwork, and that was it. And I was up there with one of my good friends, this guy, Chris Reaney. He's an amazing artist. And he was painting one night. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. He's painting, and I'm sitting there doing stickers. Because that was like something I always did. I love doing stickers. So I'm sitting there doing stickers, and I'm just doing all these stickers with the character I was doing at the time. Because I really wasn't doing ND anymore. But I was doing a character that I kind of don't want to mention the name. But so I was doing this character, and on a bunch of them, I just started writing, different sayings and different like witty things. And he was working on this painting, and it was this giant cell phone. And this thing is like 7 feet tall. It's a giant cell phone holding a small person up to its ear, like where its ear would be.
Oh wow!
As if it was like, it was a fantastic piece.
I just saw a similar painting to that not long ago of like an iPhone holding a little person. That's cool. That dude, Chris Reaney, he said was his name.
Yeah, Chris Reaney. Yeah, R-I-N-I. He does a lot of work for the UFC, the Vice,
nice.
their website.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's doing this painting. This is back in 1999, like kind of before the whole like internet boom and everything, and like before like really. So he's doing it, and it's got this giant cell phone walking with a briefcase and holding a little person up to its ear. and he goes, "Yo, what do you think? I'm done." And I look up and I just go, "Ha! Robots will kill." And I just look back down and I start doing stickers, and I just start writing "Robots will kill" on all these stickers. And I'm just hanging out all these stickers doing "Robots will kill." And in the back of my head, I'm kind of like, I really love this, but I don't want to put it out there yet because I don't know what I want to do with it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if I wanted to turn it into like a clothing brand or something, like something, So I kind of just put the name in the back of my head. So in 2000, when Kevin was like, "What do you want to name it?" I just said, "Robots Will Kill." And he goes, "I think it's a pretty cool name." And he said to me, he's like, "Yeah, but like, are people not going to get it? Like, are they going to, like, say Robots Will Kill and not get why, like, it's art?" And I go, "Who cares?" I'm like, it's catchy enough that I think it'll just stick and people will get it. So that's what we wound up using. So we used that as the name in 2001 when we launched, March 2001. So this year was 15 years.
And what was the website like in that first iteration? What did it look like? Or what was it all about?
So back back then it was kind of stripped down. I mean, we had a graph section that had all these photos, well, the photos that actually I took back in the day. Me and Kevin scanned all of them, and we had this whole graph section. Then we had like spotlights on different artists. So we had, Chris Rini. He had, he wasn't a graffiti artist, but he was an artist. So we have like 10 of his pictures, and just a little bit about him. And we would do that with different artists. And then we'd have a link exchange, which had, basically, we started reaching out to other sites, and we're like, hey, we'll promote your page, you promote ours. And people at first didn't get it, but then they became receptive to it really quick.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and back then, there really was no graffiti websites. I mean, you had Art Crimes.
Yep.
You had Six Sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pure Graffiti was around, but Pure Graffiti was mostly a forum that just people talked about beef and really didn't.
Yeah.
So when we did the website, we didn't want to have any of that. We didn't want to have, I didn't really care about the graph beef. Like, I wanted to just promote artists. And I wanted that idea of, somebody in Staten Island could do a piece, it could be on the website, and somebody in Japan could see it.
Yeah.
If somebody could do something, somebody in Australia could see it. That was just bananas to me. Like, it was just, like, insane.
Well, and I'm curious, early on in 2001, did you start getting reception from places as far away as Australia and Japan?
Yeah, what was incredible was we launched the website, and the first week, we get 13 visitors. And we were like, 13 visitors? Holy crap, 13 people found us and looked up, whatever. And that was kind of always the goal. As long as we got more than 13, we were always happy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the goal number. Even to this day, like, we'll joke around and be like, hey, it's more than 13. So Kevin's like, listen, why don't we invest in a geo map, and we could watch where people come from and see, how long they're spending on what pages and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm down for that. So we wound up buying this map thing. I was totally like computer illiterate. He knows all this stuff. And we were seeing people from Australia. We were seeing people from China. We were seeing people from, the Midwest, the West Coast. And it was telling us they were spending hours on the website. Like one great example was, I remember seeing that somebody from China spent over 6 hours on the website.
Wow.
And now, this is back in like 2001, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, somebody's sitting there for 6 hours. So that was the beginning of the website, and at the time, like, I was doing a lot of stickers, and I started doing T-shirts, mainly because I wanted a way of money to come back in so I could put it back into the site, because, web hosting costs something.
Mm-hmm.
Advertising in magazines cost stuff, because I was starting to take out ads in magazines and stuff like that. A little bit later on, but like Beautiful Decay, Kill Magazine, like all those, like I was putting ads in because I wanted people to see these other people's artwork. So, as that started to happen, the site started to grow, and then we started getting emails of people wanting to submit pictures. And I'm sitting there going, Kevin, what the hell are we going to do? I'm like, we can't have people emailing us images. I was like, one, that's sketchy as hell. Two, how are we going to, really figure this out? So what Kevin did, I think it was by 2002, he figured out a way to do a self-upload feature.
Nice.
Where it was totally anonymous. Basically, people just uploaded some images. They didn't have to sign in or anything like that. They would upload images, tag whatever artists were in it, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't get to see those images until after 24 hours, because after 24 hours, the IP addresses would be wiped clean.
Nice. Okay.
So we had no way for anybody to track anything. It was also, we housed it out in Belgium, so we didn't have to worry about, because, over the years we had, different police departments coming to us and be like, we see that you have Oz on your website. He's doing damage in the neighborhood. We need to have your records and everything like that. And I'm like, cool, there's no records.
Wow.
And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you could reach out to our server, but I was like, I'll give you their email address, but our servers will wipe clean after 24 hours. I didn't tell this to them, I'm just like, like, there was no way, so the IP addresses were wipe clean. There was no sign-in, so there was no need for, a login and be associated to somebody's email or anything like that. It was fantastic. And so we went from getting, a couple people email pictures to, at the height of when websites were really, popular in the early 2000s, we were getting 500 images a day uploaded.
Wow. That's really impressive, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. And we went from, 13 visitors, unique visitors, not clicks, because there's a difference. If, a lot of people don't realize that.
Uh-huh.
A visitor is an individual person that actually comes to your site. They can click around, but then there's a click would be, like me clicking on 5 different pages, that's 5 different clicks.
Yeah.
But I'm still just one visitor.
Right.
So, we went from having 13 visitors a week to having, I think we were up to like 50,000 visitors a week.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, we were averaging a couple of thousand a day, and we had such a huge graffiti, encyclopedia. And, the art stuff kind of took took a little of a, back burner because people were coming for the graph mainly.
Yeah.
Whether it was because they saw it in graph magazines or, they were telling friends that they had pieces on there, whatever. But, they would come in and spend the time on the website. So we were looking at this geo map, and, you'd bring up the map, and you'd just see red dots all over it. And it's just like, what the hell? And, you can just mouse over them, and it would tell you, this person's been on the website for 4 hours.
That's
this
so
person's been on the
badass.
website for 20 minutes.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible.
And it must have been really encouraging to know that this idea that you had was really was catching on.
Yeah, and I mean it was incredible, but at the same time, I didn't want to cash in on it. I had people trying to buy it off of me. I had companies trying to especially with the t-shirts and stuff like that, trying to come in and take over and all that stuff, and I just didn't want that. I'm like, nah, screw you. This is my thing. Go get your own thing. I don't care. And we didn't have advertisers. Not one penny from advertisers on the website. We didn't. I said to Kevin, I was like, I don't want a banner across the top of the site.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't need Barnes and Noble's advertising for their. He's like, yeah, but he's like, I agree with you, but at the same time, we could be getting 20 cents a banner, and I'm like, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm like, it just kind of takes the wind out of the sails for me.
Yeah.
That was the mid 2000s, when websites really mattered. And as time went on, things change. For example, nowadays people don't go to websites unless it's something specific.
Yeah. Totally.
Social media is where everything's at right now. People only go to a website to buy something because they know that's where you get it. They don't just hop around on a website for hours anymore. They hop on social media, they get their 20 updates, and they move on.
Of course. Yeah. And so I'm interested though. So in this mid 2000s, when you said websites mattered, you are now dealing with this huge influx of visitors. You said you're getting sometimes 500 images a day that are being submitted to be posted, which must have kept your buddy Kevin super, super busy.
Funny enough, actually, I was the one going through them. I would sign in and I would look at basically pages and pages of graph images and go through them every day, and I'd have to clean them up. Whether it was say there was 5 different fill-ins on a page and they only tagged one person.
Right.
I would have to add those other artists, or if it was a poor quality image, I'd have to delete it. So I was the one actually doing all that.
So you were doing a lot of work. How did that affect your own work, your own drawing, painting, the practice that you were trying to build?
In the early 2000s, it was tough because I had just gotten married, and my ex-wife, I don't think she understood it, So I was spending time doing that, and then also doing a ton of the everyday housework, and it kind of did. My artwork took kind of a hit. It's not like I stopped doing it. I was still doing it, but I was only doing it because I was in a show. I was only doing it because I was in a book or a deadline or something like that. I wasn't doing it because it was my outlet. Yeah. And that happened for a couple of years there. When I got divorced in 2005, that's really when I kind of really dove back into it. I wasn't just doing paintings, and also at the time I was designing all the stickers, I was designing all the t-shirts, I was designing all the stuff related to Robots Will Kill. So I'm doing design, but I'm not painting. I wasn't going out and do walls. I wasn't like I said, I wasn't doing the outlet part of it. I was just doing the producing part.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking, because if you have that much traffic coming to a site and you have a team of, it sounds like at the time, 2 people, that turns into a full-time job, right, for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would, I have a 9-to-5 job. I would leave my house at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd go to work, commute, get home at 7 o'clock at night because my commute is 2 hours in, 2 hours home.
Wow. Where were you working?
Like Midtown,
Okay.
like over by Times Square.
Yeah.
It's a regular union job. Actually, I still have it. I've been there 15 years already. Yeah.
Nice.
So I was doing that. I was coming home, spending time with my wife, and then I was designing stuff, going to bed at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up at 6 to do it all over again. So
yeah.
Like again, it wasn't. I'm sorry, not just designing stuff, but going through the graph images, going through the the artist images and creating artist profiles and cars, creating all this stuff. And Kevin was great with like the digital aspect of it. Was that he helped out as much as he could, but at the same time, I couldn't call him every 2 seconds and be like, "Yo, can you do this? Can you do that?" I just didn't want to do that. So I was doing a lot of it on my own. And then like for example, on Saturdays when I'd have off, I'd have to spend like 2 hours at the post office mailing stuff.
Right.
Because at the time they didn't have click and print at home for shipping. So I'm sitting there, putting together sticker packs, putting together T-shirts orders, doing all this stuff. So I'd spend like half a day at the post office, and that was back then. When I got divorced and I actually met my wife that I'm with now, the art became more important again, and I kind of stepped back from worrying about designs for the website, worrying about all that kind of stuff. I kind of focused again on my artwork and getting the name out there in total.
And I think a lot of people are probably saying, "Come on, Adam, ask him about the robot." I'm really curious. Like, had Robots Will Kill had a lot of following and had a lot of momentum. When did your kind of infamous robot character come up? How did it come out of that?
So the robot is in the mid '90s. I was messing around with we talking about characters and stuff like that. I was obsessed with the cube shape and the idea that everybody and anybody drew that shape, the 3D cube, that you learned in school. So I was obsessed with that iconic graphic image, and that you do it and everybody can relate to it. And so they're like, "Oh, I did that in grammar school. I did it, whatever." So that turned into a television, and that television was the same kind of thing. It related to a lot of people. The television then turned into a robot, which was a boxy-looking robot, and it was more square-headed and more of a generic robot, and it was still an image that people could get because it still was closely related to the cube. So people kind of can identify with it. Then I wanted it to kind of be more of a personal and more of an emotional kind of robot. So that's where this robot kind of took form. So that would be in 2001 really is when I kind of, for lack of a better term, started to perfect him. And I kind of right out the gate used him to promote the website.
Okay, yeah.
So it was this robot that people could realize it was a robot, but it still kind of had human qualities. It's kind of got the slash eyes, so they're kind of like a simple, kind of sympathetic eye. This is all stuff that I learned by copying those artists back in the day.
Yeah.
Copying those, and he's got that slight hunch, kind of like that defeated, kind of like saddened kind of feel. Again, something learning back in the day from copying those artists. And and at the time, I kind of gave him a name. I gave him the name Poboy, P-O-B-O-Y, and that was an acronym for Prosthetic Organic Bot of Youth. So yeah, it's not something I actually threw out there a lot for people, but it was something I wanted it to be like this kind of he has human qualities, and he wasn't so rigid, and he wasn't a box robot that you saw on TV like Robbie the Robot,
Yeah.
So, and then just over the years, I just he's become such a thing that when people see it, they know the name. I don't even have to write Robots Will Kill half the time anymore. People just see it and they know what it is.
Yeah, definitely. And so then can you talk a little bit about how, Robots Will Kill kind of also became a crew? Because there's, Venge and, who are some of the other guys that are a part of this Robots Will Kill kind of, posse that you got?
All right, so in the mid-2000s, so at the time, all the art shows I was doing, I was going by Robots Will Kill. And everybody knew my work because they associated the robot with Robots Will Kill. So they knew me as Robots Will Kill. Someone that I used to paint with, I had asked him if he wanted to help out with certain things. And when he was doing murals, he was putting Robots Will Kill on all his murals. and it was when robotswillkill.com, and he started to tell people it was a crew, and I didn't, for lack of a better term, I didn't approve that. I didn't want it to be a crew. I just wanted it for another outlet for the name to get out there, so people could, look into it and see these other artists. I didn't want it to be some kind of generic graffiti crew.
Yeah.
So at that time, he started doing this, so everybody kind of started believing that it was a crew. So now I had people asking if they could be thrown down and all this stuff, and I'm like, that's not a crew. And I'm trying to repeat it over and over again, and it just was getting defeating, So that person was painting with Venge a lot, and I said, no problem. It'll be a crew. That's it. So then at that time, that's when I started going by Chris RWK more, so people could identify me separately, whatever. So then Venge, we would talk, and he would ask about, different people pushing it. As of right now, there's me, Venge, Kevin, Over Under, ECB, Flying Fortress, Jesse R, Mike Dye, Joselle, and PETA. So it was kind
which
of
is
a mixed crew.
That's a super mixed crew. That's really diverse.
Yeah, that was the thing. For my answer, it was I didn't want just anybody to push it. I wanted it to be kind of different outlets, kind of different styles. I mean, you got PETA, who does these incredible 3D pieces that, I'm sure you've seen his new work, and you just see how he's making a building look like it's not a building.
It's so sick, man, his use of architecture. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got ECB, who's doing, 7-foot-story, portraits that are just incredible. And then you got Over Under, who does, these realistic pieces. And he was, at the time, he was bombing and doing a lot of the paper birds that he used to do everywhere.
Yeah, and Flying Fortress. You're mentioning some names that are just I actually did not know that all those guys were associated. So now is it a crew? Is it just a collective of friends? What do you consider it?
I guess more of a collective of friends. Because when it comes down to it, it's not once in a while we do shows, and, they all, were showing it. For example, when we did the 15th anniversary show at My Place of Art this year, all those people were in the show.
Nice.
But at the same time, it's not like they push it on every wall or anything like that, and I don't care. It's not something that I'm why aren't you pushing the crew? I'm not it's not that mentality for me. For me, it's just that, I don't even know how to explain it anymore, because even if you ask somebody about Robots Will Kill, they're going to think about my robot. They're not going to really think about Jesse R or Mike Dye or any of these other people. They're going to think of my robot.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always kind of been weird as far as a crew-wise, because it has an identity on its own already. So, whenever any of them are in town, we paint together, but it's not it's not like one of those crews that, everything's got to be branded with.
Sure. And I think and it's interesting. I just haven't known, I moved to my part of Bushwick about 10 years ago, and a couple years in, I remember seeing you guys did a really nice wall just right off Flushing, and it had the one that had the boat, and just you had a ton of characters, and I remember thinking, oh, RWK, okay, this is a crew. And so, I didn't even know. And I wonder how many other people are kind of like me, and they're just not really knowing. But so that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, that's what happens a lot. That wall was me, Venge, and ECB.
Yeah.
That's funny. A funny quick story is, so Venge actually has that building. That's the Soho Art Material building.
Yeah.
So about 10 years ago, when Bushwick wasn't Bushwick, and nobody was painting anything.
Right.
So Venge would paint Soho, and the building owner next door, this guy Max, asked him to paint his building. So now Venge has 2 buildings over there. Then across the street, we speak to them. They want us to paint that building. Then down the block, they want us to paint that building.
Yeah.
And this is all before the whole Bushwick Collective thing and everything.
Sure.
So it was people seeing what we were doing and being like, oh my God, that could be on my building instead of what's there now. Awesome. So we had done. This is actually how I knew you were in the neighborhood. Was across the street from that building, you had done the big corrugated building.
Yeah, the big silver.
You had done a huge set of Adams blocks.
Yeah.
And I remember coming around the corner, and Venge was like, what the hell? He's like, what? And I'm like, dude, that's Adams from San Francisco, California. I'm like, BA crew. And he kind of was like, he kind of didn't know. Now, I knew just from, following graffiti for years ago, when I went out to California in 98, I showed you, I took pictures of your work out there.
Yeah.
And everything. So he was like, yeah, but I go, dude, what's the big deal? Because Over Under had done the side of the building.
Yeah,
he
still has it there. Yeah.
Yeah. I said to him, I go, what does it matter? He didn't go over us. I'm like, at least it's somebody I respect. I'm like, it's not like it's, the art school kid who just got a building because his father owns the building.
Yeah.
So that was cool. I was like, holy shit. I'm like, I was amped that you were in the neighborhood.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was awesome. Those huge silver blocks here, the big thick S-curve that came around. It was really nice set of blocks.
Thanks, dude. Thanks. Still running too. I'm glad it's still there.
Yeah.
It's got a big 99-cent store sign on it now, but that's all good.
What's funny about that building is the owner, when he asked us to paint it, he was like, "Just can't paint here because I'm going to redo it." And he kept giving us this run around. So he was like, "You know what? Just do the side for now." So that's why he overrun had done the side. Then there was a brick part that ECB had did, and it was running for maybe a year. And then this guy, Apollo Torres, was in town, and he asked if we had any walls, so we had him do that section. It was kind of, if you're looking at that wall, it's to the right of it.
Yes.
So Apollo had done that, and then all of a sudden one day we start seeing pictures of that wall, and somebody else had did it. And Venue was livid. He was like, what the fuck? He's like, nobody even asked us. He's like, that's our building. We have permission to that. And I'm like, I'll be honest, I don't even know who that is. And apparently, I guess it was somebody from out of town.
Okay.
And they got the building because somebody else got the building for them. It was some big long story. But you know how it is over there now. I mean, you see, back in 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
The only people over there were crazy people screaming at me while I'm standing on a ladder.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. When I moved here, 2006, it was like, whoa, it was sketchy.
Yeah, you had the taco spot on the corner, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was all that there was. Yeah, one coffee shop and that taco spot. That was it. Now, Robots Will Kill, super established. So are you. You got 2 different Instagram pages. They're both booming. And how much time are you putting into the website now?
The website I kind of took a step back from, only because, like I was saying, a lot of people don't go to websites anymore. Just by traffic, you can see it. Just by reading articles and reading up on it, kind of educating myself on it. Instagram, Twitter, all those things are a lot more popular. Yeah. So Instagram really is where I've kind of taken it. So I'll do spotlights and stuff like that on artists on the Instagram page, on the Robots Will Kill Instagram one. Yeah. I'll promote shows and events and all that stuff on there. And kind of like Biafra sent me a shirt.
Who?
He's an amazing artist. Biafra.
Biafra?
He's Biafra, like Jello Biafra. Okay. Biafra, he's a CBS crew. He's Midwest, does a lot of freights. Okay. Really great kind of noir kind of style. So he sent me a shirt. So whenever he sends me anything, I'll post it up on there and be like, go check out this person. And he had just done a Christmas sweater with a typical kind of Christmas pattern, but had a giant fat cap on the front of it. Nice. And then so it was great. So I promoted that for him. And then I promote the show and your podcast. However, I can kind of help out the community still.
And it's awesome. And that was your original goal for the Robots Will Kill site, right? And you never never really had that chance because all of a sudden it blew up as a graffiti site. Yeah. And so, I come to this point, dude, in all these interviews where I'm like, oh man, there's so much more we could talk about. But what I'm really curious about is what's coming up next for you? What's on the horizon? I mean, I see you're at Comic-Con, which I know that you've been doing that for several years now. What's on the agenda for Chris RWK?
Well, January I have a solo show out in Salt Lake City. So I'm gonna be taking a trip out there, which should be fun. I'm gonna hit up Denver for a couple of days and then Utah. I'm amped to go out there because I want to check out the Cypher Shop, East Shop out there.
Oh man, it's a good one. Yeah, I hope to get East on this soon. Yeah, super good guy.
Because those DF guys are such a huge influence on me, Emmet, and Sub and Gaze and all those dudes. So as far as short-term stuff, that's coming up in January 20th, Feist Gallery, FICE, and then I'm just really going to focus on doing a lot more shows, just because I'm going to do merch also. I'm kind of getting back into doing the T-shirts and stuff like that, and pins and all that stuff. So I'm going to be doing a lot more of that, but I've always kind of as far as the artwork, I don't like charging too much for my artwork, but at the same time, galleries don't want to hear that.
Of course not.
So I'm trying to create a good balance and a good level of originals at a certain price point, and then whether it be prints, drawings or whatever at a different price point.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of refocusing my artwork.
That's awesome. And, the other thing I think would be really great to do to kind of wrap this up right now is, like, just tell us, like, how we can, the best way to find your work and contact you or hire you or get you to do a show, a group show or something. What's the most easy way to contact you?
Well, either Instagram, at Chris RWK or at Robots Will Kill. If you have an event or anything like that or a show, you want me to check out your artwork, hit me up on either one of those. I'll promote it on Robots Will Kill Instagram. Also, Chris at robotswillkill.com. That's my email. You can always just shoot me an email.
Oh, and you have a podcast as well.
Yeah, and I do a podcast called For the Masses. It's For the Masses Podcast. We interview artists of all different mediums. I definitely want to have you on an episode coming up in the new year.
That'd be awesome. I'd be honored.
Yeah, definitely. Like last week, we just did like a crossover episode with Halski out in Queens.
Cool.
Which was fun. But then we also have a lot of lowbrow pop surrealism because it's with Rob, who used to run Suburban Vinyl. So that's kind of like his realm and like the toy world and all that stuff, which I'm kind of clueless with the toys. So
which is interesting, right? Because like your characters just seem so perfectly set up to be done in vinyl.
Yeah.
Is that in the works in any way?
Well, I'll be honest. When I first started doing it, I tried looking into getting them made, and getting toys made back then were about $10,000 a pop just to get a rendering and all that stuff. So I just couldn't afford it. So now, as 3D printing and all that stuff has come into play, things are getting cheaper and cheaper. So I've had a lot of companies in the past 3 months approach me about doing the robot.
Great.
So yeah, I think it's going to be something that's going to come out. But I want it to come out on my own terms, in the sense of I don't want it to look like some cheesy 3D printed, knockoff toy. I want it to actually be kind of sculptural and interesting. So yeah, that'll probably come out, I'd say, within the next year.
Well, that'd be awesome, dude. I'm sure a lot of people will find that to be super collectible.
I appreciate that.
Chris, dude, I got to thank you, man. This was awesome. And like I said before, there's probably so much more we could talk about. So maybe we'll catch up with you in the new year and do a part 2. Because, we had to jump around a little bit. But this was great, man. And I got to thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Listen, I was amped to be on the show. Like I said, I had such a great, episode so far. It's seriously an honor.
Dude,
thank you.
Thanks for adding to it. And yeah, man, best of luck in the new year. Again, you guys were all listening just now to My Life in Letters. This was episode 8 with Chris RWK. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Also, I want to give a shout out to my engineer and editor, Uzi Ego. He's on the production.